Hi, I'm Ronnie Meek, and welcome to the Unbeliever's Bible Study, Session 16, Samuel and Saul. The books of 1 Samuel through 2 Chronicles contain virtually all the biblical records of the kings of Israel and Judah. There are a few other fragments of this history included in the prophets. The stories of Samuel himself, though, and of Saul are mostly found in the book of 1 Samuel, where we are introduced to David before he became king. Samuel was born to a woman named Hannah, who had been thought to be barren. She prayed to the Lord and promised that if he would give her a son, she would dedicate him to the Lord. She conceived and gave birth to Samuel. After he was weaned, she brought him to the priest Eli at Shiloh, where he was brought up serving the Lord. Eli's sons, he had two, Hophni and Phinehas, and they were real stinkers. And by their actions, they brought the worship of the Lord into contempt. As a result, a prophecy was given against the house of Eli that both sons would die on the same day. The Lord first appeared to Samuel while he was still a child. He came to Samuel one night and called his name. Samuel did not recognize the Lord's voice and thought it was Eli calling. He went to him, and Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lay down." This happened another time, and Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lay down." It had a third time, but the third time he went to Eli, the old priest realized that it was the Lord and told him to say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." Well, the Lord did speak, and he gave Samuel a hard word against Eli's house. And the next morning, Eli said, "Tell me what he said. Don't hold anything back from me." And so Samuel did. He delivered a hard word faithfully, and Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what he wants to do." In the course of time, Eli and his sons all passed, and Samuel became the recognized leader of Israel. Furthermore, Samuel led all Israel. He led all of the different tribes, and he led Israel to military victories over the Philistines. Samuel made a circuit of Israel each year, judging. But as he grew old, his sons did not follow in his footsteps with integrity. So the people came to Samuel and asked for a king. Samuel was not pleased with this request, but the Lord told him, "Listen to the people." So he gave them what they asked for by giving them the best they had. This is not usually a good thing for us. Saul, the son of Kish, was from the tribe of Benjamin. His father sent him along with a servant to search for some donkeys that had been lost. They searched for quite some time and finally came to the town where Samuel was present. And the servant suggested that they consult the seer about the donkeys. So they went into the town and they met Samuel. Samuel told them that the donkeys had been found, but that he had a private word for Saul. And the private word was, "You are to be the king over Israel." Saul was anointed king, and at first things went well. He was a tall, handsome man, and he led them to some military victories, but he had a fatal flaw. Saul's besetting sin was fear. The first sign of the problem came at Gilgal. Saul and his army were encamped against the Philistines. The enemy was increasing in numbers and strength, while Saul's army was shaking with fear and starting to desert. Saul was supposed to wait for Samuel to come and offer the sacrifice before engaging in battle. But when Samuel did not arrive when Saul expected him, he decided to offer the sacrifice himself. Now, that may not seem like a big sin, but to offer the sacrifice was the duty of the priest. There are only two people in Scripture who are given the title of both priest and king. Melchizedek, back in Genesis, we talked about him in the story of Abraham, and Christ. And by offering the sacrifice himself, Saul was placing himself in that category. Well, Samuel arrives just as Saul finishes and says, "What have you done?" And Saul gives a roundabout excuse that amounts to, I was afraid of the enemy, and I made a rash, stupid decision. Well, fear of the enemy will often do that to us. The result was that Samuel told Saul, you've done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command of the Lord, your God. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. Well, the Lord was gracious and allowed Israel to defeat the Philistines, but Saul lost his dynasty because he feared the enemy more than he feared God. But it gets worse. Later, the Lord instructed Saul to go and destroy the Amalekites as punishment for what they had done to Israel when the people were coming up out of Egypt. This was a slow-pitch softball for Saul to just hit out of the park. He was supposed to completely destroy all the Amalekites and everything that belonged to them. He didn't. But Saul and the army spared Agag, the king, and they spared the best of the sheep and the best of the cattle and the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. The Lord sent Samuel to Saul to inform him that he was now rejected as king. When Samuel finally found Saul and the army celebrating their victory, Saul was in high spirits. I have carried out the Lord's instructions. And Samuel challenged that statement. What about the sheep and cattle that I hear? Saul lamely replies, we spared the best to sacrifice to the Lord, but we destroyed all the others. Of course, they got to eat what they sacrificed, but not so with what was destroyed. You did not carry out the Lord's instructions. You only kind of carried out the Lord's instructions. Saul protested that I did carry out the Lord's instructions. I went on the mission the Lord assigned me. I completely destroyed the Amalekites and brought back Agag, their king. Something's wrong with that sentence. The soldiers took the sheep and cattle from the plunder, and the best of what was devoted to God in order to sacrifice them to the Lord, your God, at Gilgal. Then Samuel replied, well, first of all, he replied with, stop. But he replied with the famous line, to obey is better than sacrifice. He went on to say, because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Saul broke down and admitted, I have sinned. I violated the Lord's command and your instructions. I was afraid of the men, and so I gave in to them. It's one thing to be afraid of the enemy, but as a leader who is afraid of his own people, well, such a leader is of no value to the Lord, and really not to the people either. The last fear of Saul that we see concerned a young man named David. Now, we're going to talk at length about King David in the next session, but he first appears as a young man in 1 Samuel, and you've likely heard of his encounter with a 9-foot tall giant named Goliath. At first, Saul was jealous of David because of the successes David had. Ironically, David's successes were a great boon to Saul's reign and his kingdom, but Saul was too fearful to appreciate that. With time, Saul's jealousy of David turned to fear. In fact, the scripture says Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had departed from Saul. And so Saul spent the rest of his days trying to kill David, though David never raised a hand against Saul. Ultimately, David fled the country and lived among the Philistines to escape from Saul. Saul's end came in a battle against the Philistines on Mount Gilboa. David was not engaged in that battle. Had he been, he would have most certainly fought against the Philistines and likely saved Saul. But because of Saul's fears, this could not happen. Samuel had passed on and Saul was now dead. It's now time to move on to the house of David, and so we will in the next session. I hope you'll join me.